Hi, welcome to Minutes with Mickey, a time for us to wonder about God's Word, the story of Naboth's vineyard, which we find in 1 Kings chapter 21. This is really a horrible story, and it reminds me a little bit of a childhood story that my children used to read about a girl called Nancy May. And Nancy May, she had sort of a continuing mantra, and her little mantra was, I want what I want, and I want it now. And this is just how it feels to me as I'm reading this story as to Ahab. He just wants what he wants. And if he doesn't get what he wants, he's just going to be all sulky and mad. It's like, my goodness, this man is some sort of an emotional, psychological cripple to be that selfish and self-centered. So he goes after trying to, in one sense, just legitimately buy Naboth's field. But the problem is that the vineyard is not available to Ahab because the Lord told Naboth not to sell it, not to give it up, not to let it go out of the ancestral lineage. And I find it interesting, and I wonder, why is it that Ahab said, I'm going to turn it into a vegetable garden? What's the significance of that? Is there something about vegetables that is important or not important? Is it some sort of a disrespectful thing to have turned this plot of land into vegetables, or was it kind of like a nice thing he was trying to encourage him to sell it because that's what he was going to do? The text itself doesn't tell us that, but I think that's worth investigating a little bit. Then we also see, and I think very clearly so, we've seen it earlier in Ahab and Jezebel's reign, and that is Ahab was a terribly wicked king, but while Ahab might have been the head king, it seemed very clearly that Jezebel was the neck that turned the head, because she uses complete kingship authority to gather a sitting, a judgment, so that and she used the seal. She was able to do everything without even Ahab knowing about it. He just allowed her those kinds of freedoms. And she was just a really wicked person. And so then Naboth is judged unfairly by lying people who obviously it benefited them in some sense. They were maybe given money or whatever, it doesn't tell us, and then put to death. And then when Jezebel comes and tells Ahab, she doesn't tell him what she did. She just says, now Naboth's dead. And without asking a thing, I find it really interesting. Ahab doesn't say, why, what happened? And he doesn't ask for the details. And he offers absolutely no sorrow whatsoever. It's just, oh boy. And he goes and takes his field. What kind of person is this? What kind of tragic, psychologically damaged personality has that kind of callousness? And yet, even though we see that Jezebel was one that did all of this, caused this murder to take place and this unfairness happening, when Elijah came down, God told him to come and pronounce judgment on Ahab and his family and Jezebel. Ahab was held accountable for what Jezebel did. Very interesting. Why would it be that way? Why wouldn't Elisha just come and say, here's what Jezebel has done, I'm going to nail Jezebel? So that's something that's worth looking at, that the way they were connected so strongly to the two of them. And then the judgment that God has against Ahab and his family. It's just horrifying, the fact that blood will be spilled and that dogs would eat. We won't see that judgment come into play until we get into 2 Kings a little bit further on as far as Jezebel is concerned. And I can hardly wait to get to that story because I have some real questions about that one. But isn't it interesting that at hearing this judgment, Ahab decides to put on sackcloth and ashes and beg for mercy, and God gives it to him again? What does this say about the grace of God? Unbelievable. I think most of us would want to say, he's done. He should be history by this time. Seems as if God constantly gives Ahab opportunities to learn over and over and over again about who God really is. What does that say to us? How many times have we seen God's hand in our life and we haven't acknowledged God? How many times do we maybe have that same kind of Nancy May attitude? I want what I want and I want it now. And how ridiculous that is when we see it in someone else. We need to look at it for ourselves. And then we can stand and say thankfully that the Lord does offer mercy. But he also judges us for the things that we allow to have happen, even in our own immediate family. There's a lot to feel grateful for, and yet there's a lot here that can convict us on our own. We may not be as bad as Ahab, and yet there for the grace of God, go you or me. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great week. Bye.